Thank you for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. Just be respectful of everyone's time. If you joined the session, hopefully you already know, but today we will be talking about the recently sent out workforce evaluation data for Arizona's Title I adult training programs. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Everyone's mics and cameras should be off. We do have the Q&A settings set up so that if at the bottom of their screen, you should see a Q&A button that you can click on, and that way you can submit questions throughout the presentation. We'll try to answer some of the questions as we go along. We've got a few built-in spots to answer questions, and anything that doesn't get answered as we go through, we'll try to address at the end. After the presentation, we're planning on posting both the slides and a recording of the presentation on the OEO Workforce Evaluation page on our website. This webinar will be approximately 45 minutes, and following the webinar, as soon as the webinar ends, you'll get a feedback survey, and we'd really appreciate your input, just making sure that we're providing helpful information during this session. Again, we'll have the Q&A at the end, but you don't have to wait. If it helps you remember the questions, you can just submit them through the Q&A that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom account. If you have questions that are specific to your specific training programs or your institution, it would be helpful if you could email those to labor.info@oeo.az.gov. During this session, we're just planning on going over broadly what everybody can anticipate in the reports and during the data rollout, but we're going to keep conversations about each institution's data one-on-one for now. So the objectives of this presentation are to introduce the purpose and scope of the WIOA Title I Adult Training Program Performance Reports. There is a statewide report that's been published on our website that has aggregated data across all the training programs on the ETP. As well, we sent out individual reports to training providers that had sufficient data for us to conduct independent analysis for each of your training programs. Not every training program on the ETP had enough participants. If there was only one participant, for example, we wouldn't have been able to provide a report. But if you are on this webinar, you were one of the training providers that did have enough participants for us to develop a report. During the session, we'll also highlight key findings from the evaluation, try to better explain the scoring and rating system for training programs, share our intended next steps for implementing these insights, and again, answer any of your questions that you have and gather feedback. So we'll start with just a reminder about who the Office of Economic Opportunity is and why we're the ones providing this data to you. We'll go a little bit into the evaluation methodology and scope. I'll give a reminder of the WIOA performance measures. And then again, we'll go through the evaluation project timeline and next steps. So to start with the Office of Economic Opportunity, our mission statement is we aim to strengthen Arizona's workforce and economy. To do that, we have a lot of different teams. We're a relatively small office, but we do a lot of different work. So we've got staff that work on workforce planning. We've got a team that works on economic and labor market information, dissemination and analysis, and that's the team that I'm on. We've got a team that does population and demographic research. We have a grants office. We have the Arizona Finance Authority. And then as well, we do work relating to tax and regulatory analysis. Our agency was established in 2016. And during our development, one of the main goals had to do with, or two of the main goals have to do with supporting the Workforce Arizona Council strategic initiatives. And while we have a lot of different functions, one of our many functions is supporting the council's strategic initiatives for the Arizona Network System. The Arizona Network System includes the WIOA Title I ETP services for adult dislocated worker and youth services. Two of the strategic goals set by our agency as well as by the council are increasing the number of WIOA participants enrolled in high impact training programs and supporting strategic decision-making through new research publications, including labor market and workforce analysis. The report we're talking about today supports both of those initiatives. So my name is Rachel Tashbook. I'll be taking us through the first chunk of slides in the slide deck. I'm a research administrator with a focus in trying to help with the applied piece of our labor analytics. So I do a lot of training with career counselors and the job centers trying to help people use this data to make informed decision-making. We also have Doug Walls on the line, who is our chief economist and our labor market information director, who is the head of all of our labor market team and economic analysis team, really making sure that we provide quality data for public use. We also want to make sure that we can answer any questions that you have, not just about methodology or the applied piece of the report. If you have any questions about the council role or any questions that on the ETP process. So we asked some of our team members to also join. So on the line, we have Ming Yu, who is one of the lead analysts for this project. We also have Stacy and Kennedy, who lead efforts to support the Workforce Arizona Council. We also invited Nancy Meaden and Tina to join us from the Department of Economic Security, and they bring subject matter expertise in the Title I policy and subject matter expertise on the ETPL. So let's look at the evaluation methodology and scope. So with this evaluation, we wanted to fairly evaluate the effectiveness of Arizona at Work Title I adult training programs. It was really important to us that this evaluation took into account the barriers to employment your participants face, because if you have participants that are facing more barriers, that'll impact their potential employment and wage outcomes. And we want to make sure that that's recognized during the evaluation. We also wanted to provide data to expand understanding of participant outcomes. So we know in the past it's been difficult for participants across and stakeholders across Arizona at Work to really understand what's happening once we serve clients. And so our hope is that these reports will help everybody better understand, are we making an impact and where are we making a significant impact? Finally, we want to provide workforce practitioners, training providers, and policymakers objective feedback so that you're able to see what's working and what's not working in a very clear, objective way. Please note that there's no additional reporting requirements. So we are able to use unemployment insurance tax data provided by the Department of Economic Security, matched to employment records and matched to the Arizona at Work participant data. So that allows us to have a really accurate understanding of employment and wages for the participants that we're analyzing. We don't need any more reporting from our partners in order to obtain that information. This data is really accurate. UI tax data is comprehensive and provides those quality employment and wage records. On the other hand, we know that our partners with the training providers, you're required to report employment wage outcomes, and we do not have the authority to reduce existing requirements for reporting at this time. For the evaluation that you received, we looked at over 17,000 adult program participants who exited services between Q2 of 2020 and Q1 of 2023. In this review, we only looked at students that are in Arizona at Work programs. So many of your students are not a part of Arizona at Work, did not get funding through Title I, but only people that were a part of the Title I adult program were included in this analysis. The focus really is Arizona at Work Title I participants. With that focus, we're able to analyze about 55 training providers and 88 training programs. This is not comprehensive of all the training providers and training programs on the ETP. We limited it to training programs that had at least 5 completers during the review period. The metrics that we looked at were employment in the second quarter after Title I program exit, employment in the fourth quarter after Title I program exit, and average wages in the second quarter after Title I program exit. These are in alignment with metrics that are reported for, based off of the Department of Labor standards for these programs and that we're required to report up to the Department of Labor. So just to clarify these definitions, when we're looking at employment in the second and fourth quarter after exit, we're looking at the percentage of participants who are in unsubsidized employment during the second and fourth quarter after exit from the Title I program. So you might provide training for a set amount of time, but if they continue to receive maybe resume support or interview support a little bit after they exit your program, there might be a little bit of a lag. Same with average wages, second quarter after exit. We're looking at participants once they've fully exited all Title I services, not just the occupational skills training piece that you provide. There are a lot more notes about qualifications for the data that you can find in the technical notes at the end of the report. But one that I included here was that average wages in the second quarter after exit does not take into account the number of hours worked within the quarter track. It's the total amount of earnings that we see during that quarter, but we don't know how many hours were worked during the quarter. So if the numbers, hopefully that helps clarify why you're seeing the numbers that you're seeing. It's not an hourly, it's not annual, it's the quarterly amount of earnings. So let's get into the fun part. How were the programs evaluated? Some of you may have heard of the statistical adjustment model used by WIOA for the negotiation and assessment of performance levels for state and local workforce programs. If you haven't, that's okay, but this predictive model was based on that model. And what we do is we compare actual participant outcomes to predicted outcomes based off of participant demographics, employment barriers, and local economic conditions. So this lets us not just say, did a program perform at 100% or not? It lets us take into account, were you serving single parents? Were you serving homeless individuals? Was the economy doing particularly well or not doing particularly well in your local area? And so the predictive model lets us take that into account instead of just saying, pushing for 100% employment every single time. For each of the metrics, we had a rating of 1, 2, or 3. A rating of 2 is good. That means that the school performed within the predicted range. So you were able to hit the employment and wage outcomes that we anticipated you being able to hit based off of your participant characteristics, employment barriers, and local economic conditions. A rating of 1 means that the program did not see the employment and wage outcomes that we predicted would be reasonable to achieve based off of the predictive model. And a rating of 3 is fantastic. It means that the program is able to perform better than what we'd anticipate based off of the predictive model. So because we have a scoring of 1 through 3 for each of the 3 metrics, employment second quarter after exit, employment fourth quarter after exit, and wages second quarter after exit, if you add those all together, you would get a score of between 3 and 9, just depending on how your program performed with each of the categories. And so we said that if you got a score of 6, that meant the program met expectations. That means you probably had a score of 2 in each category. Maybe you did less well in one category, but you exceeded in another. But overall, you met expectations. If you saw a score of 3 to 5, that means that the program is performing below what we'd expect. But then if you saw a score of 7 to 9, that means overall the program is performing better than what we'd expect. And so they exceeded expectations. Overall, we saw that 43% of programs exceeded expectations, which was really exciting to see. We saw 20% met expectations and 36% fell below what we'd expect. If you're interested in the aggregate level data that looks at all of this information by occupational skills group, I encourage you to look at the statewide report, which can be found on our website. Some of the key findings from that report I put here. So for example, programs in health professions and homeland security showed the highest employment and wage outcomes. Cosmetology services often fell below expectations. And then there was a strong alignment between high demand industries and program success. So nursing and health services support, dental assisting, and hygienist programs, and transportations all saw or largely saw success. And that matches what we see broadly in the economy. So at this time, I'm going to actually turn it over to Doug Walls, and he's going to walk us through what we can expect in the individual reports.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, and as Rachel said, I'm going to discuss what you can expect in the individual reports that we did share with you. These reports were tailored specifically to your institution and focus on the Arizona at Work participants who are enrolled in your program. So not necessarily all of the students who are enrolled or completing your programs, just specifically those that were enrolled in Arizona at Work, Title I adult services programs. And our goal with these reports is to provide detailed insights to help you understand the program performance, and then also to gather your feedback before we're sharing the information with a broader audience. And so each of the reports does include a performance overview of all the programs evaluated at your institution. And this covers key metrics such as the number of participants entering and completing your trainings, as well as quarterly employment and wage outcomes, again, just for Arizona at Work participants. And it is important, and I'll show an example on the next slide, but it is important to note that, as Rachel said, only programs with more than 5 or more completers were included in the evaluation. Next, each of the next section in the report is the training evaluation results, which has evaluation results for the program performance ratings based on the participant demographics and local economic conditions. As Rachel said, individuals have different backgrounds, there are different economic conditions, and so those are factored in to the training evaluation results section. And these ratings provide a data-driven comparison of how your programs are performing relative to the expectations given the population you serve. And this allows you and us to see where your programs are exceeding, meeting, or falling below expectations. And then I will just take you through some of the tables that are included in the report. So this is going to be the first table, just looking at the different programs that individuals from the Arizona at Work system were entering and then completing. And then you'll note the last row there shows the participants in programs with fewer than 5 completers. So we did include that information if there was an Arizona at Work participant who took a training in a program that had fewer than 5 completers, just to show that activity within other programs. And it's worth noting, if you were a training provider that only had 1 training program, this table may look different, as well as the others. They might be much smaller. On the next table, this looks at the different participation and completion rate trends over time. It's looking at quarterly activity within your training programs for Arizona at Work participants, just to get a general sense if things are changing over time for completions or individuals entering into your training programs. The next table, table 3, is looking at actual employment and wage outcomes for those participants by the different training programs, so you can get a general idea of what the actual outcomes were for those individuals. And then in the next table, table 4, looks at those same actual employment and wage outcomes over time over the course of the period that was included in this evaluation, again, to see if there were differences in the success rates for individuals exiting at different time periods. And then table 5 gets into that comparison between the actual outcomes of individuals and then the expected or predicted outcomes based on the demographic condition, the demographic characteristics, and the economic conditions for those participants specifically. And you'll note that the predicted outcomes and expectations will be different for different training programs, or can be different based on those participants that were served. And so it's highly customized to the participants that were served within those programs. And then you can see each of the training programs has a rating for employment second quarter after exit, employment fourth quarter after exit, and then the average quarterly wages. Those three ratings are summed up to get that overall training program rating, which, if you go to the next slide, is shown in table 6. And so you can see the sum total of those ratings listed as the overall score for the training program, and then the designated overall rating, which again can be below expectations, met expectations, or exceeded expectations based on the sum of those three outcomes ratings. And then it's worth noting this is a complicated evaluation process, and we did have some economic modeling in order to help estimate the predicted outcomes. And for those that are interested, we do have a summary of the methodology and the approach to this process included in the technical notes of the documents. And then we will have a more detailed methodology available on our website as well.
Thank you, Doug. All right, so next I wanted to share some of the tools and resources for training providers. So each of you who have a training program on the ETPL that had enough participants to have a report should have already received that report by now. If you have not received your report, or you think we're communicating with the wrong person, please let us know. We had 2 informational sessions, one today and one yesterday. And we plan on taking a recording of this session to post online, so that if you have a team member that you think should have been on this call or would benefit from getting some of this information, we'll make that accessible. Our hope is to continue to provide opportunities for feedback and improve our review processes. Again, we'll have the survey after this session, but also we highly encourage you to reach out to our email box if you have any other additional questions or feedback. In late 2025, we plan on publishing online dashboards visualizing some of the data, making it a little bit easier to access and a little bit easier to navigate views. And then in the spring of 2026, our intent is to update this data using more recent data so that you can continue to get updates on the performance. This is similar to the last slide, but I just wanted to share some of the key dates of the process. So we published the statewide evaluation report in December. That's available on our website. We sent out the reports to the training providers that had data on January, or the week of January 16th. And we're having the webinar yesterday and today. And then in February, we'll be sending the individual reports and data to the WIOA local workforce boards, including their ETP coordinators. We'll have the dashboards at the end of 2025. And then again, we'll have a data update and an individual report update in the spring of 2026. So we really appreciate you all showing up for this webinar today. And you can further engage by reviewing both the statewide report and your program-specific performance reports, and letting us know if you have questions or feedback on the reports. And that's all I have. So I'm going to quickly look at the Q&A and see if anyone has submitted any questions. And if you have any more questions, feel free to keep typing them in. So I'll read some of these. So we got a question asking if the programs considered in the ratings had to have at least 5 participants through WIOA. And that is correct. They needed to have at least 5 Title I adult participants during the reviewed program period. And Another question we got was, what are transportation programs? I know I mentioned information about them earlier. And transportation programs include programs in truck and bus driver or commercial vehicle operator and instructor programs or ground transportation programs. This is largely CDL programs, and CDL programs were the only programs that met the 5 completer threshold for programs in transportation. So we had a question on the data that's being reported to us. We do get the employment and wage data using the unemployment insurance tax record match. And then we get the participant information from DES through HAC from people enrolling in the program, in the Title I program. I'm going to give it just another minute and see if other folks submit any questions. So to clarify, this data does not use, so we know that the schools are required to gather employment and wage outcomes for their participants. The wages and employment records that are used for this are independent of that. We do not use what the schools collect for this evaluation. We use the unemployment insurance tax records. We get the data from, we get the participant records from WIOA, from the Arizona Job Connection tool that all the Title I participants are required to use to enroll. And then we get the employment wage outcomes from the UI tax. Right. And please, we love all the questions. If people have further questions or thoughts, please continue to let us know. We did receive another question asking if the training providers are allowed to see if the data matches your findings. We're allowed to share the data that we get in aggregate like this, but we, unfortunately, for data privacy, we can't share the individual records. That's a limitation because we're using the unemployment insurance tax records. But that allows us to get really accurate results because we were able to get access for this reporting. So for follow-up, again, please send us more questions, but also let us know what insights are most valuable. If you're going through the report and there are specific tables that are more useful than others, let us know. If there are additional tools or resources that we can provide that would make this more useful. Again, very useful information. And then, do you have any thoughts on the evaluation process in general? This is our first publication of the data. We'll have the tools later this year, and then there'll be a data update at the beginning of next year. But if you have other suggestions, we appreciate it. You'll be able to find the statewide report and we plan on publishing an FAQ document and the slides from today and the recording on the OEO website. And then, as I keep plugging, the labor.info email box is the best. I mean, you're welcome to email myself as well, but with the labor info box, it's a great way to reach our whole team. And we really appreciate you joining us today for this call. Again, there's a survey afterwards. If you don't mind taking it, we'd really appreciate it and just give us some of that initial feedback. But that's all I have for today. Thank you for joining.